Hey, Penny, thank you for being on the show and everything. You have a fabulous life. I mean, you've done a lot of accomplishments in entertainment and everything else. You're the co-host of Awake Nation, which is phenomenal. I mean, all the information that you put out there to the public and everything else. I want to actually start from the beginning. If you can tell us like where you were born and raised and things that you did growing up and becoming who you are now. And also, too, I think the public will be very interested to know that you're the true 11. And if you watch Stranger Things, you see the character 11. So if you can kind of talk about that, that would be really, really great. So I'm going to let you go ahead and start it off and tell us about yourself.
Well, feel free to interrupt me at any time because I go off on divergent tangents. I was born August 11th. Of course, they took my day of birth and gave that to me as a name. I was born August 11th, 1958, in Hollywood, Florida. Hollywood, Florida was actually created by Hollywood, California, a developer who liked Hollywood, named Hollywood, Florida. He lived in Long Beach after Hollywood, California, to bring the influx of the stars from Hollywood, California to Miami. So I was born in Hollywood Memorial Hospital, and I was raised, I thought, in kind of a normal life. It wasn't until I was 58. That's a big skip, right? I was born at 58, and I found out at 58 that I was MK Ultra. And I found out after I left my second husband, who's dead now, and he was a terrible husband. So don't even say I'm sorry, because I did a jig when I found out he died. Um, and so I left him, and then I started researching. I went to my brother's house, and this was in March of 2016. I went to my brother's house, and I lived there for almost a year. I started writing. I had to learn how to walk and talk all over again because when I was with my second husband, it was mostly a slow kill. I think he was sent to me as a handler, and they were drugging me for about 12 years. And so I got off all the drugs that they put me on, all the doctors that they shot me to. I withdrew from. I could have died getting off all of the drugs that they put me on. They wanted me to suicide. As a matter of fact, I did suicide in San Diego at one point, and I ended up in a hospital in San Diego that when I was coming out of MK Ultra, I was asking who the gentleman was because my doctor he was Asian, but he looked like uh, Hirito Ishii, and I was like, how would I know what Hirito Ishii looked like? Because I'm old, but I'm not freaking, Methuselah's age. And so when I looked up Harito Ishii, I realized that Harito Ishii worked with Joseph Mengele. It's my assertion. He worked with him at Fort Detrick. So when I leave my husband, this is where the story begins and my research begins. I leave my husband in March um, of 2016. I go out to my brothers. I learned how to walk and talk all over again. I learned my technology all over again. I was a technologist, a singer by trade, a writer, an entertainer, but I also worked within the workforce as legal help for huge law firms. I was a technologist and a legal word processor. I helped people decide what softwares to use, etc. And I was so erased by the time I got out to see my brother that I couldn't even figure out how to use an iPhone. I had repaired computers, but I couldn't figure out how to operate one. So I had to relearn my technology all over again. I literally had been erased. I believe that they wanted me to die, but here's the thing. When I suicided, the last thing I remember was talking about Marilyn Monroe, which that's a trigger. Um, and uh, and I basically um, had to retrace everything about my life when I was getting my information. I had to retrace everything. So I started off and writing again, learning how to write again. I'm a writer. I started writing when I was in sixth grade. I wrote a children's book. In third grade, I was reading on the 11th grade level, an AP English major. I wanted to be a writer. I didn't want to be a singer. I wanted to be a writer and reporter, which actually, that's what I'm doing now. I am a reporter for the Awake Nation. I'm also executive producer for the Awake Nation. So I left my husband in March of 2016. I went to Chicago. I lived with my brother. I started writing. I realized now that my brother is indeed a spook, and I don't know who he is. I think he might be like a Hitler baby because he didn't look like any of us. And I started asking questions. I asked questions of my brother David wrote a book. He wrote a book called The Whistleblower about Bush, the Vatican, and my family. He was made homeless. He came and lived in Mission Beach with the homeless. I lived in San Diego for 25 years with my second husband. He lived in Mission Beach and he was murdered on Mission Beach. And I now know that he was murdered because he wrote the book, The Whistleblower, which was about the elite. And I think he found out who I was and he came to warn me. He lived with the homeless people for 2 years, about 20 minutes from my house. And he was murdered in daylight on the beach. I went back to investigate his beach. When I left my brother's house, and I went and I stayed with this other woman who was suicidal, and I said that's not going to happen on my watch, but she was indeed crazy. And then God basically sent me to Branson twice. That's when I was really unfolding from MK Ultra. When I went to my brother's, I started writing. I took James Patterson's masterclass so I could remember how to write. I spent a year writing the characters for Bradford and Valentine, which I then realized was it was coded uh, coded words, okay, in scripts. It was coded, and I was asked by my very first fiance, Durrell, to go to Lake Havasu to see him. I hadn't seen this man in 40 years. So he said, "Do you want to be a snowbird?" And I'm in Chicago. "Want to be a snowbird?" I'm like, "What's that?" He says, "Well, you'll find out what that is as soon as it starts snowing," because I'm from Florida and California. So, and I completely forgotten anything about my life with Durrell, who was my first fiance, anything about my life with my first husband, Steve. I had to regain all of these memories again. It was a very long road. I literally was erased. When I went to go marry my second husband, Sam, who looked like David Duchovny, which is really irritating because now I want to punch David Duchovny every time I see him. But uh, when I when I left him, that's when I started really researching and asking questions. And then I realized that everyone in my life knew one another. That's frightening. When my first fiance I met in Florida, I had no idea that he knew my first husband, who was my guitar player. And his name was Steve Zenos. He was a very good guitar player. He played like Eddie Van Halen. I think they probably even had the same teacher. He was raised in Palos Verdes. And we had a band together called Stranger. I can't even tell this with a straight face. Okay. Zenos means stranger. All right. So after I left Darrell, my first fiance, and that I had met in Florida, which now I know he was sent to meet me. Um, After I leave Darrell, they send me Steve. Now I'm in a band at that point. It's Darrell is my manager and my agent. I'm in a band called Big Business. In that band, my drummer, his name is Bob Bowman. And Bob Bowman, I didn't figure out any of this until like 58 years had passed. Bob Bowman was my husband Steve's best friend. Okay, they grew up together in Palos Verdes. So Bob Bowman in that band Big Business knew Darrell. Okay, but it took me 58 years to realize Steve knew Darrell too. I didn't realize that he knew Darrell. Then I find out after I get married to Steve, I leave Darrell in 1982, and they send the guitar player in, and I was bent on doing music. That was my life. And so I asked him to play his scales for me. First date, play your scales. If you play your scales really good, I'll go out with you. They knew that they couldn't send me a crappy guitar player because I would have rejected him. He came and he met me at a place called Sutter's Mill in Huntington Beach. We used to call it the S&M Club. And it was country band. Okay. But we were a jazz band at that time, right? You asked me earlier, what kind of music have you played? I played the entire spectrum. I started out when I was like, 5 years old singing Stevie Wonder. And I went from that to doing top 40 disco, show tunes, R&B, Casey Kasem, just the wide spectrum of music. So when I leave Durrell, then they send Steve in. And Steve is supposed to be my guitar player, my boyfriend, and eventually my husband. I do marry Steve because he's my handler. The last name is Xenos. Xenophobia is fear of strangers. So hence the band is Stranger.
It was spelled with an X, like
Xenos.
Wow.
I used to sing. I used to take my name and my middle initials are L period A period. So I used to say Laxenos. LA makes the very best Xenos, right? From Nestle's. So, when they send him to me, and he tells my drummer, "I'm going to get her." Those were his words, because he was sent to me to acquire me. So we end up getting married. We have a band called Stranger. I become Mrs. Stranger. And none of it makes any sense until like 58 years later when I start researching everything. Then I start asking questions. I start asking questions about my agent after I leave Steve. I get another agent. I have a band called Paper Doll. Paper Doll. I innately know things, but everyone just dismissive of it. Oh, well, that you're just being, you know, dramatic, Penny. Really? Because not really. So I have this band called Paper Doll, and I know that the bass player and the keyboard player are literally gonna have a fight on stage. And I'm doing everything. I'm doing the booking, I'm moving the gear, I'm paying the checks. And so I'm tired. I say I think I would just want to walk in with a microphone and nothing else. I don't want to have to do all this stuff. So I get told to go and see this person named John. I won't say his last name. And I go in and it looks familiar to me, but I don't know why. And actually, I met him in the 80s, but I got erased. And I didn't remember that for 58 years. So I meet John. John has a band. The band is called Stinger. Of course, I know who got stung in that one. And so I joined this band, Stinger. And I don't end up just carrying a microphone. I end up literally like lugging about 12 cases of props and clothes and doing clothes changes and so much for the microphone. And I start working for this individual. I end up having an affair with him. Now, I know that you do not, unless you're married to your guitar player, you don't sleep with the members in your band. That's just the thing. You don't do that.
Tell that to Stevie Nicks.
Right. So so I ended up having an affair with my agent. Now let's fast forward to 58 years later, or 30 or 40 years later, right? So I start asking questions when I'm coming out of MK Ultra about my second agent. But my first agent and fiance gets in touch with me and tells me I can he'll fly me out to see him in Lake Havasu. I haven't seen this man in 40 years. He beat me, he drugged me, and that's why I left him. But I forgave him, right? Because I'm Christian and a little stupid. You can forgive somebody, but just don't let them back in your life again. But I went there and I got answers. So I find out that this first fiance that I met in Florida not only knows John, my second agent, but I find out from Steve, my first husband, that John is my brother. And
Blood
actually,
brother?
biological brother.
Biological brother. Wow.
Yeah. So Needless to say, how that conversation went for the first 5 minutes thereafter, I simply swore. It was not a very nice conversation. I was just screaming and swearing. And Steve said, "You sound upset." Like, "Hey, boo boo, I've got a picnic basket." And I started screaming again. Yes, I am upset. And so this is how I find out that my former agent that I had an affair with is my brother. 3 weeks later, Steve dies.
And
Steve
actually,
dies of a heart attack.
and actually,
Okay. Wait. So I had gone back to talk to the drummer. Now I'm homeless. Okay. I have my truck, and being homeless isn't that big, okay, for a singer, right? Because I would travel from venue to venue. I'd have to often, I'd get up at 6 o'clock in the morning when I was working two jobs, and I'd get done at 6 in the evening. I'd take a shower. I'd drive to LA like 3 hours. I'd gig, and then I'd drive back home. You get off at like 1:45, 2 o'clock, and then you get back on the road, and then you drive another. So I get home like about 6 o'clock. So that's like 24 hours. So sometimes I pull over and go to sleep. So that wasn't a big thing for me to be homeless, but it happened because it is a psychological operation. I was asking questions. I asked these questions when I found out John was related to me, because I initially told him, "Hey, we're related through the Baumgartner name." And then he says, "Not all Baumgartners are related." And because I found out my grandmother was a Baumgartner, and I say, "Well, they are, but they're not blood related, but they're clan related." But then I found out, I'm like, he's my brother, right? Which he denies because he's a pathological liar. So, and Steve, in my estimation, is redeemed because he told me the truth. So, whatever happened to him, or whatever happened between us or didn't happen between us, I have absolutely forgiven him because he told me the truth. And the truth is very important. And
Steve passed away. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
yes,
just to clarify, Steve passed away. Now, John is your biological brother, but you didn't grow up with John.
no, I did not. But I now know why he looked familiar, because he looked like my brother David that I did grow up with. They're the same height, the same girth, the same hair color, the same facial features.
This is
That's why he looked familiar.
I want you to keep the train of thought because I want to pick up exactly at this spot, but I want to touch on the MK Ultra thing for anybody who watches this show and doesn't know what MK Ultra is. This is the CIA program MK Ultra you're speaking of, correct?
Yes. So MK Ultra will erase you. You will have no memories. When I went to go marry my second husband, I had to call my first husband to find out when we got divorced. But I couldn't even remember when we got married. That's a very significant day in a woman's life when she gets married. I knew that I got married on Thanksgiving, but I didn't remember what day, what year. I called him 4 times to ask him that over and over again because I literally got erased, and they took all of my pictures.
It's normally the husband that forgets his anniversary, not the wife.
Right?
Yeah.
I know I was married on Thanksgiving because I cooked a turkey. I went home and I cooked a turkey, and he found the person to marry me. So I had to go down about a bazillion rabbit holes to try and find out who I was. So when I was made homeless, I'm industrious. I had business cards. I still dressed nice. I would go to a Starbucks and work at a Starbucks writing and talking to people about MK Ultra and other things from 6 in the morning until 12 at night. That's what I've done my entire life. I've worked two jobs and, worked from until my eyes cross, and then I say, "Shepard out."
Yes.
So this is, nothing new for me. That is the life that I've chosen to live.
Were you ever publicly dosed? Like I've heard MK Ultra had in the 60s were experimenting with LSD and giving it to people who didn't know they were given it, type of
Yes.
thing.
Yes,
Did
I
that
was.
happen
I
to
think
you?
I was given microdoses by my second husband and probably by my first husband too. My first husband I did coke and smoked pot, and
That's just LA, right?
right. That's the industry. That's the industry. You know what I'm saying? That's the industry. And I did, coke recreationally. I remember that they sent another manager to us when we were in Lake Havasu, and he had $10,000 worth of coke. And I did the coke with the band members one night. I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't like it. I like sleeping because I'm, already a hyper individual. I didn't need it. I didn't like it. So back to asking questions 58 years later. So I started asking questions about who John was. And I looked at his picture and I noticed there was a resemblance between him and Joseph Mengele, Hitler's scientist. And I had initially not even looked at John. I looked at myself and I saw Irene Schoenbein, and she had her hair up just like I did in that picture. And I said, Paul, I can't hear you. I can see your mouth moving.
Are you talking about the angel of death?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I believe that's actually my father. I posted a thing on my Facebook where you can see my brother David. He looks like Rolf, Joseph Mengele, and Irene Schoenbein's son, their only son. When I saw Rolf, I started crying because David was dead, and he looked like David. I grew up with David. I know David. I loved David. When he wrote The Whistleblower, he asked me how to write a screenplay because I'm the writer in the family. And I said, well, I can tell you, it's principles, but you're going to have to take a class on it, which he did. And then he gave me his screenplay, which was stolen from me by an agent who worked at a church who knew Darrell, my first handler. So I went back to see Darrell when he asked me when I was in Illinois, and he said, you can come and see me when it snows. You want to be a snowbird? I went and I saw him. I hadn't seen him in 40 years. I spent 40 days and 40 nights in the desert with a Satan, not the Satan, but one of his people, one of his peeps. And I learned a great deal. He took me back to California, and then he took me to John's high school, which I just researched because I didn't know anything about John. I researched him and found out that he's been an agent in the industry for 50 years. He has them on his client list: Madonna, Lady Gaga, Katy Perry, Jay-Z, Beyonce, Kanye West, Taylor Swift, Whoopi Goldberg. He represents some comedians too, not a lot of actors and actresses. Jay Leno. These are 5 pages of people that are on his list. Initially, I said, I thought they were all bad.
Who is this guy again?
My brother, who is my agent, who I
John.
slept with. John.
Okay, sorry, I didn't want to lose track of who
I
you
know
were
it's a lot of people. I can't even tell you all the people I slept with because I was, a beta sex slave. So that's what you do.
Really?
Yes, that's what you
Wow.
do. You're trained in Hollywood to be compliant, and I am a conservative, so that is not going to change about me. But I definitely wasn't conservative with who I slept with. Just put that out there.
So has the beta sex slave years, this was this before you were married or
Yes.
during?
If I was married, I was faithful.
Okay.
If I was not married, I did not have anyone to be faithful to. If I had a boyfriend, I was faithful to that boyfriend.
The along this line, this time period where you were a beta sex slave, was this while you were with the band? Was this after the band when you were
This
homeless?
would be, you were trained to be a beta sex slave from childhood. They train you in childhood. They molest you or rape you, drug you, starve you, um, do some incomprehensible things that will erase your memory. You won't remember. They put you through SRA, which is satanic ritual abuse. And then those memories will come back if you want them to come back. I prayed when I left my husband and I said, God, reveal myself to me. That's a very potent prayer. And God does it in such a way that your head doesn't explode, so that you get the information in a fashion in which you can absorb it without just freaking the F out.
This I'm so sorry for the abuse you suffered, but this started then in Hollywood, Florida,
Yes, it
as a
started when I
child.
was a child.
Okay.
So they were using me in experiments when I was a child. I had virtually no memories from 6 below, and then also uh, I didn't have any teen memories either. I could tell you what school I went to. Um, and I remember when I was in at Henry D. Perry Junior High School, they gave me a girl. Her name was Brenda Bright to teach her math. Brenda Bright. It's horrifying because she had a portion of her brain where the short-term memory was gone. So I had to try to help her learn. Well, that's kind of what it was. And I'm thinking to myself, she was in a car accident. What happened to me? I was a very bright individual. Why was my mind completely wiped where I would have to go back to my first husband and ask him, what day and year did we get married? That would be something that would be indelible in your mind as a woman.
Did your family have anything to do with your abuse as a child, or was this
Yes.
something at the schools?
No,
Trying
it
to.
was my family. My mother, I believe, actually volunteered for MK Ultra. She was a nurse in North Carolina. The Duffer brothers, who wrote Stranger Things, were born in Durham, North Carolina. That's where my mother was. She was in nursing school in Durham, North Carolina. And in 1983, I believe it was, I was pregnant with two twin boys, and I saw them. They had dark hair and blue eyes. And at almost 2 months, Steve forced me to get an abortion. I don't think those babies were aborted. I think they were actually taken, or something of their DNA was taken, because the very odd thing is that the Duffer brothers were born 9 months after that.
Quite a
The Duffer
coincidence.
brothers wrote Stranger Things,
Yeah.
and they were born in Durham, North Carolina. And my mother was in nursing school in Durham, North Carolina in the early 50s before my brother. And that was the career that they chose. But my mother was gay. So why did my mother marry my father? Because she married him for cover, number one. But did she marry him? Because my father said to me, the one that raised me, who's not my father, said, I've done something so evil that even God wouldn't forgive me. And out of the mouth of babes, when I was like in my 40s, I said, well, uh, God would even forgive Hitler if he asked, not realizing that my mom was a Hitler baby. I believe she was in the projects as well. That's why she volunteered. And she was born in Jamaica, New York. I didn't know anything about my family, my mother, my father. I didn't know anything about John until I started researching and asking questions. And I
Th-
asked the question, why do you look like Joseph Mengele? Why do I look like Irene Schoenbein? And why does David look like Rolf?
So this that's what I was about to ask you. Is this so? This is where the Mengele connection comes in. Now the program you're speaking of, where your mother was born, this was Hitler's program to create the master race, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed babies. Is this
I
what you're
I
talking
think
about?
so. I think that's what she volunteered for. She was a nurse, so she would have most assuredly volunteered for in vitro fertilization. That's an absolute.
Which was cutting edge back then.
It was indeed. However, Joseph Mengele was doing experiments on women. He created an entire twin town. He married Martha Mengele, who was his brother's widow. They said to keep control of the Mengele farm implementation business. But he married her July 17, 1958. I was born August 11th, 1958. Was I her child? Or did Joseph Mengele take Irene Schoenbein's ovum, fertilize them, and implant them in Martha? I don't think that I am the person that's on my birth certificate. Can I prove any of this? Absolutely not. Just like they say in conspiracy theory, when they asked Jerry, can you prove any of this? And he said, absolutely not. A good conspiracy theory, if you can prove it, then they've done something wrong. And then she asked him, well, who are they?
Have you done your DNA by any chance?
I have not. They've taken enough of my DNA at this point where I don't want to give up my DNA. I'm certainly not going to knock on John's door and ask for DNA and then get thrown in the crazy house.
I was just
Yeah, I don't
curious
blame
because
you.
of
I
the
don't know.
sorry,
Do
Sandy,
you
go ahead.
still feel like regardless of the ovum switch, do you still feel as if you're a Leo? August 11th, do you still feel like a Leo regardless?
I do.
My mother's born August 14th.
Really.
Yes.
We should talk off air. Um, by the way, anybody that's watching this, if you have or suspect that you might be MK Ultra, you're missing memories. It is a long, long process. I will be regaining memories for, until I'm like 140, which I plan on living that long. But if you have any questions about MK Ultra, please text my phone. I won't answer unless you say who you are. I'm not going to answer unless I put you in my contacts. So you can text my phone. It's area code 619-779-9771. That's 619-779-9771. Also, we solicit people for the Awake Nation. We talk about targeted individuals, etc. In regards to the targeting, what happened to me after I started asking questions, I got thrown in a crazy house for a year,
What state was this? Where did this happen?
ill and annoyed.
Oh boy.
Yes, for a year. In And the people that were there were like, "Why are you here? There's nothing wrong with you." As a matter of fact, one person that became a friend of mine, who mailed a Bible to John for me, said, "I thought you were the new administrator." I was like, "No, nah, I wasn't the new administrator, man." And when I went in there, this is really odd because I had like 20 pairs of shoes in my truck, right? They wouldn't give me any of my shoes. When I went in, I had on a pair of uh, rhinestone heels, and they let me have the rhinestone heels, which is weird because I could have killed somebody with them.
Well, normally they take away shoes and belts
Yeah.
when you're
They let me have those shoes, which is weird. So those were the only shoes I had. And then this is a very weird aside story, but when my brother Rob came to see me and asked me why I was there, I said, because John wants me here. The reason why John wanted me there was because I was asking questions, and his son was in the White House.
who was his son?
When you say targeted
I
individual,
cannot say. I can only say his name is John.
Can you? I don't want to without
I can
giving
tell
it
you off
away.
there.
Is okay? Without giving it away for the show, kind of what capacity or department or
I cannot say.
too close? Okay,
Too close.
sorry, Zane.
You know
Go
what,
But
ahead.
that was the reason why I got locked up. And when I showed pictures to the people that were there as to these are people in my life, 5 people quit because they said, shit, your family's deep state CIA. I said, yes, they are. That's why I'm here. This is
Zane,
a proposition. This is what happens to people that are whistleblowers. And you will see this over and over and over. They will take you and they will kick you out of the workforce. Then they will either throw you in jail, frame you for something, throw you in jail. They will throw you in a crazy house. They will drug you. You'll get raped or whatever happens in the crazy house. That didn't happen to me because I was too smart at that point. But I wasn't too smart to get locked in the crazy house. And I wasn't doing anything for that to happen. I wasn't, you know, shouting out in the streets or pulling my hair out or running around naked. I wasn't doing anything like that. I was in a church and I had my phone in my hand and my phone shook and there was a picture on it I can't even tell you what the picture was. And I went into a full on state of MK Ultra. I had a handler who sex trafficked me out of the crazy house. And I said, can they continue to do this to me? Because I've been talking to this guy on and off when I was, you know, finding out who I was, which it scared the bejeebies out of me because I realized I've been a singer for 50 freaking years and an actress, meaning that I could literally be coded by any song that I sang, that somebody could literally turn me on and off like a light bulb with a string of words. That's frightening.
This is similar. It reminded me of the Francis Farmer story that you were
Yes.
just talking about.
Well, Francis Farmer was one of the first people that got a lobotomy, but the world actually kind of says that that wasn't true. It was true. She was put in a hospital because she didn't want to work in the entertainment industry anymore, and her mother wanted the money and the fame and the fortune. And so she said, well, you must be crazy if you don't want to work in the entertainment industry anymore. And they threw her in a crazy house and she got raped, and eventually she got lobotomized. And Joseph Mengele worked with one of the first people that created the lobotomy. Joseph Mengele was called the Angel of Death. For those children who do not know who Joseph Mengele was, Joseph Mengele was Hitler's scientist. They called him the Angel of Death. He experimented on women and men and children. He loved twins because of their telepathic abilities. He would take twins and kill one in front of the other one to see what the emotional reaction was. He would do operations without anesthesia and sew them together and watch them rot. He was an egregious, horrendous individual, but he also was paid by the Rothschilds to do eugenics because the Rothschilds actually paid Hitler for eugenics. I don't think they even gave a flying fig if Germany was destroyed or not, because Germany was just a proving ground, if you will, and they let in every one of those people that were beholden to the Third Reich, and they were creating the Fourth Reich. They let them into the United States of America and gave them high positions of ranking. It wasn't just 5,000 scientists. It was anybody who was beholden to the ideals of the Reich, which we, I believe, are facing right now in our current regime, which is ruling over us in the United States of America as our governance.
A lot of people don't know the history of eugenics and euthanasia in this country, and how it actually predates what happened in Nazi Germany. But the lobotomy, I can't remember that doctor's, if you want to call him that name, off the top of my head, but didn't he win a Nobel Peace Prize for creating that?
I'm not sure. I would have to actually go back into my archives of research.
I believe he was given a Nobel Peace Prize for inventing the lobotomy. Some of the more famous people that got him was one of the Kennedy children. One of the girls was
The little
lobotomized.
girl,
Yeah, the John Kennedy's youngest sister, I believe.
the one that ended up dying in, I think, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Something to that effect. But she
She
was
had a
obviously
mental
never.
disability. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if you're gonna stick a piece of metal coat hanger up into somebody's brain and swirl it around like a milkshake, obviously you're gonna do a lot of damage. The idea that that was in any way a helpful thing is
It was
just
basically to
insanity.
curb the violence. So it would just basically not only, curb any violent tendencies, but it would mute your ability to have any emotional effect at all.
That's the shock therapy. I think had this supposedly was supposed to do the same thing, but and more often what it did was just damage people for life.
Yes, well, Donald Ewan Cameron, who was the designer of the first DSM, he was the Scottish individual who was head of the World Psychological Association. While he was doing that, he was erasing women and men at the Allen Memorial Institute and doing the electroshock therapy. One woman actually went back to sue because she went in for postpartum depression. She came out not knowing that she had a husband or children.
Hey, Penny, when I worked for the Secretary of State, I was a supervisor over there, and they took me into the archives, and I had to do some inventory in the archives. And the person who ran the archives, um, took me to a safe. He opened it up. I was with another employee named Kinder Larry, and he pulled out a gun and he placed it in my hand. And he says, "Do you know what you have in your hand?" I go, "A gun." And he goes, "Yeah, but not anyone's gun." He goes, "It belonged to MK Ultra agent. That
Assassin.
agent was Sirhan Sirhan."
That's why Robert Kennedy Jr. says Sirhan did not do the murder.
Yeah.
He's still in prison, but RFK Jr. I had an individual on our show who writes for he's actually PR for Snowden, Assange, and Chelsea Manning, and on the super PAC for RFK Jr. So I asked him a couple of questions regarding RFK Jr. because I'd researched it, and RFK Jr. said it was not Sirhan Sirhan. And Sirhan was indeed an MK Ultra because he didn't remember anything that happened. And Jolie West was one of the individuals who interviewed him. And I believe that the Zenos family, I forgot to mention, Phil, that my husband was also a psychologist. He had his MA in psychology. He ran his parents' MFCC, Marriage Family Crisis Counselor office, which they were psychologists for 38 years. I believe that they worked with Jolie West. Jolie West was at UCLA from 1969 to 1989 as the dean of psychology, and he was running psychological experiments under Alan Dulles, and he worked with Sidney Gottlieb, who Sidney Gottlieb was working on biologicals to take out world leaders like Castro. They're going to try to do a couple of different things, take him out with a pen, which the pen would have some kind of a neurotoxin in it when it would touch him.
Never date a counselor or a psychologist.
Don't.
I made the mistake
Don't.
once.
Penny, don't.
Did you watch every episode? Oh, I'm sorry. Zandy, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, Paul. No, go ahead. No, I'm sorry, Paul.
No. Zandy, go ahead.
Zandy.
I'll wait on my. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say to her about two things. Well, actually about Jolie West, but I'll get to him later. The extraterrestrial species that I know that you talk about. I want to hear more about that. And also the target individual. You know what's interesting about that? As you were saying that, I have a friend of 66 years old, a blues musician, and he called me one day and he was like, "Hey, I need your help, little brother." And I says, "Well, what's going on?" He says, "You know, I've been having some weird things going on at the house." And I was like, "Well, what's going on?" He says, "Well, I place things where I know I placed them for sure." He said, "I am getting older, but like I placed these, and I put things in certain places and then like they're missing." So then he says, "Well, I have my keys a certain place, or a door is unlocked when I get home." So there were little things, but then it was happening in a frequency where he thought he was going crazy.
Yeah, that sounds like the CIA.
So then he started testing himself, and he thought it was demons at first. He thought it was something like it was paranormal. And so then he said, "Hey, you know what, man?" He said, "Brother, I think I'm a targeted individual." He says, and I says, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, because he said he had this guy that would be following me, see him at the grocery store, he'd see him other places." He eventually ended up confronting him.
That might be it. CIA.
Yeah, so, but before he confronted this individual, and the guy told him he said, "Well, you can't do anything about it." He told him that. And so
Right.
that was the last thing I heard about that. But yeah, before that, he told him that, he told me that like these weird things, like if you know that, you put a 6-pack of Coca-Cola in the refrigerator and because you wanted it to be cold. So you visually saw it placed down with your hand. So it kind of stains your brain like mnemonics. And then you come home and like the 6-pack is like, somewhere else. It's just not in the refrigerator. And so as those things build up, so I was wondering.
You're effing with him. Here's another thing. Okay. So about the blues thing, right? Did he play a lot of blues clubs?
He does.
Okay. I'm going to just tell you this one, and I know we're off topic. You can invite me back again.
I do too.
We can talk more. But when I go to Chicago, okay, I haven't talked to John in a long time. I go to Chicago and I meet this person. I'm still married, so I can't officially date, but I have left my spouse of 20 some odd years. And pretty much I was divorced about 16 for like 16 years in that marriage. It was awful. And so I go and I find this person on Zeus. I don't even know how you say it. And he says,
Right.
do you want to come down? He says he's a keyboard player. Okay. Do you want to come down to the Green Mill? And I say, well, I'm still married. I can't, I'd be your wingman. And so he has to ask everybody what's a wingman. And he shows my picture to everybody, which that was weird. But I go down, and it was September 15th, which turned into the 16th. As you know, it does in the clubs. I go down, and there's a camera on the sidewalk. Now, mind you, I had just learned how to walk and talk again. I had to actually learn how to walk in heels again because, I was at one point in adult diapers on a freaking walker. Okay, walkers and high heels, they just don't go well. So, right. So I'm going in, and there's a camera on the sidewalk, and there's an SUV and a limo. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. And I have this feeling it's like taking pictures of me, like when I'm going into the place. So I go in to meet my date, who's supposed to be a keyboard player. And he's not a keyboard player. He's an orchestra leader. It's his orchestra with 18, pieces. And he is a pianist and a savant. And so I see him there. And then I say, is it usually this crowded in here on Thursday night for a swing band? And somebody says, well, the mayor's here. So I say, the mayor of what? And they say, the mayor of Chicago. And I'm like, the mayor of Chicago's here. So to see my date, the mayor of Chicago's here to see my date. Okay. So, and I make a joke and I say, really? The mayor's here. Ha ha. I'd like to talk to him. And the Secret Service guy with the little thing looks at me and I'm like, shit, the mayor is here. So the mayor's sitting at the table with my date, which I think is a little odd. So then as we're walking out, he's like telling me, come in a picture with the mayor. And I just gotten out of praying and learning how to walk and talk all over again for like 2 months. And I'm like, and I felt like I just walked into the den of lions. Okay. As we're walking out, I'm kind of yelling at him saying, look, Alan, you could have told me that the mayor was going to be here. I mean, I, could have dressed crappy, but I didn't because that's who I am. But so as we're walking out, he says, that's not all. And I say, that's not all? He says, no, that's not all. I said, what's not all? He says, the mayor of London is here. So I say, because my political acumen at that time was 0.
Yeah.
But I've learned a great deal since then. I say, I didn't even know London had a mayor. I just thought they had a queen. That's
Right.
somewhere recorded somewhere. Okay. Then later on, I find out who was actually there to see him. It was Mayor Emanuel, who was the chief of staff for Obama, and Sadiq Khan, who was the mayor of London, which is one of the most incredibly powerful positions on the planet. They came to see my date, who was playing in a jazz club. Look it up. It's called the Green Mill in Chicago. It's been there for like 120 years. I think my grandma sang there because my grandma was a singer. And so then later on, as I'm researching everything, I find out he's written up in Jazz Magazine, and he's a savant. And the Prime Minister of England came to see him, John Major, with Scotland Yard. Yeah. So back to the jazz clubs. Who's following your friend? Because I'm telling you what happened to me in a jazz club. And those people are in the jazz clubs. They're in all the clubs, but they're in the jazz clubs. So tell your friend my story. And if he wants to talk to me, you give him my phone number. Sorry, guys.
But thing. Yeah.
That's what's happening to your friends, Zadine, that's called gaslighting, right? I mean, am I using that terminology correct?
For some reason he knows something. He might not even know he knows something. Sometimes you do know that you know something. And then when you start whistleblowing, then you start getting targeted. but he might not even know that he knows anything. If he knows that he knows something and he's whistleblowing, that's when the CIA steps in and tries to make you. That's one step. So they say that he's diminished capacity and he can't live on his own anymore. And he needs to be locked up in a crazy house because he's forgetting things.
Hey, Penny,
On a
when you saw Stranger Things come on TV
oh my
for the
God.
first time, and you saw the character 11, what did you think when you saw this character that is associated with you?
Well, first of all, I started crying. I'm a very emotional person. And I I emailed Darrell and I said, because I'd been out to see Darrell like right before that, and they were like looking to see the stuff that I was writing because it was coded. I was writing for James Patterson's master class, and I told Darrell, hey, just read this trailer. He's like, I read it to him. He goes, yeah, that's good. I've got it. I'm thinking, no, it needs to be perfect, but he wouldn't let me read it again because I write in coding. So when I was in the crazy house, that's when I found out. And this girl, because I'd already been writing for a year, I talked to John and said, I see you now, John. I didn't see shit then, but now I do. But at the time, I said, I see you now. I'm going to write a blog called See Me Now because I see you now. And they murdered my brother David. He wrote a book called A Whistleblower. I didn't know that that was his brother, too. And by the way, John has 7 brothers. So if I grew up with 2, let's do a little math. If I grew up with 2 and John has 7 brothers, which that's, and he's the 8th brother. So that's 9, 10 brothers because they would be my brothers, too, right? So, but then they kill one of them. So then we're back to 9. But I've never met any of them. Or have I? For all I know, I slept with a bunch of them.
That's a scary thought.
Right? Isn't it?
Joy West, wasn't he the guy when they had some soldiers that basically they were cooperating with the Koreans and they thought they were sentenced for committing war crimes, but he came in and he concluded that hey, they actually were brainwashed with lack of sleep, no hypnosis, no drugs or anything. Wasn't he that same guy?
He was like the Manchurian Candidate dude. He not only, well, he killed an elephant with LSD, first of all, which that's the most egregious thing I've ever heard on this planet.
Jesus.
Yeah, right. That just is so fucking offensive. Excuse my language.
Almost
Effing
as bad as Thomas
offensive.
Edison.
Yes, and yeah, right, with the electric
that was in
chair.
August
Yeah.
too. That happened in August. That happened around the time of your birthday too, when he did that. When he killed the elephant with LSD, ironically.
I have a feeling that he might have actually come to dinner at the Zenos house. I wouldn't have known. How would I have known? I didn't even know anything about MK Ultra until I was 58. So at one point, I was playing this gig with this band called Mr. Red Shoes. Okay. What did I know? It was 2002, February 1st and February 2nd. It was a 2-night gig, and it was in Poway. And I played, I didn't know what kind of club it was. It was a swingers club. I didn't know. How would I know? And how would I know what Mr. Red Shoes meant? Because red shoes are the blood shoes, right? That they make out of the human skin of their victims. So I played for this woman. Her name was Brenda Van Dam and David Westerfield. That was on February 1st, 2002. Brenda got home February 2nd. So 0202, she got home at 2 a.m. There were 6 people there. David Westerfield murdered her daughter and threw her body 16 or 13 miles from my church, which I think it's an Illuminati church. And the feds came in the next day and queried me as to this person's disposition. And I didn't understand any of it until I saw it on the news that this little girl had been murdered. But I played for them. So 30 years later, I asked these questions: who, what, when, where, why, and how, because I'm a writer and I'm an investigator. And apparently I've been helping other people solve murders, which is weird to me because I'm just a singer. and so February 1st is like the Illuminati ball, which is New Year's. It's a satanic New Year's. And February 2nd is satanic New Year's Day. So they took this child out. And those parents, Brenda Van Dam, the little girl, I believe, was 6. And the parents were swingers and they slept naked in the bed with their child. I believe that they were fully culpable, and I believe that they gave that child to David Westerfield, who then, uh, you know, was arrested and is serving time for that murder of that little girl. But I believe that the parents were involved in child trafficking. And so these are some of the things that now I am bent on. After David wrote a book entitled The Whistleblower, which that that screenplay was taken from me by a man named Tony, who was a friend of Durrell's. He also took my laptop in Chicago. And the journey that I've traveled and the things that have come to my attention as far as spiritual gifts, which I believe we all have these gifts. I'm not unique, and I tell everyone that. The thing with 11 and Stranger Things, and you had asked, when did I find out? When I was locked in the crazy house, a little girl came in, she cleaned the toilets out. I tell people, don't be dismissive of anyone that's in your life. Be respectful to everyone that's in your life. Little girl said, you need to watch Stranger Things. And I was like, really? Because I just found out my family are Hitlers, Eichmanns, Mengeles, and Spears. Oh my, and I'm locked up in here. There's nothing wrong with me. She said, you need to watch it, Penny. So I did. And when I saw it, I was like, oh my God, that little girl was me. My mom shaved my head until I was like in 7th grade. I still don't know why she did it. And she had the same dress I had. I had a picture with my brother Rob in that same dress when I was like 3. Didn't have long sleeves, that cap sleeves. And I just looked at her and I knew. I said, that's me. 11. I was born August 11th. And I started researching the project name. It was Project Genesis. The sub-project was E because Joseph Mengele was all over the world. So he did not, they say he died in 79. I don't know if that's true or not, but I believe that where I was, I lived in Ives Estates off of Ives Dairy Road, off I-95 in North Miami Beach. Miami Beach is what I refer to it as. And I went to Mady Ives Elementary School. That character's name actually is Jane Ives, as in Jane Doe from Ives Estates. I don't believe the Duffer brothers know I exist. My question is, how did they find out so much about me? Because there's no way somebody could have just sat them down and gave them all this information. Somehow they have knowledge about me, but they don't even know that they have this knowledge about me. I know that they dabbled in the occult when they were younger. So is that the, Illuminati? Are they getting it from the nethers, from demonic activity? Where are they getting it from? Is it epigenetic? Are they perhaps my twins that had blonde hair and blue eyes and were born 9 months after my twins were taken? Are they part of my DNA? Are they part of my ovum? Were they implanted in the mother? These are questions I don't have answers to. I probably won't have answers to. So when people say to me, well, do DNA tests, I'll tell you this much too. The DNA labs are owned. Okay. And if you think you're going to get a fair DNA test, that's not going to happen, especially if the elite are doing the DNA test. Did you ever see that movie called Colors with John Travolta, in which he impregnates a black woman, then he gives the fake DNA and tells the father, "Well, I'm not the father. Here, look at the DNA test." Those things can be, so easily manipulated. You know what I'm saying?
I like me, myself, and Irene too.
Yes, the DNA can be manipulated. I already know. My first husband told me that this individual was my brother, and I believe it. And when I found out that my first fiance drove to his high school when he took me back to California, he's telling me, I know John. I know him. I've known him since he probably drove him to high school. But they won't acknowledge anybody. And when you're in that deep into the elite, they do secret handshakes or whatever. You will never know that somebody that was your relative knew your husband before you knew him, and he was sent to you. You won't know these things. So in regards to your friend, I'd like to talk to him, and he's definitely being monitored by the CIA. They probably want to set him up for something. So
Well, they told him, they said, hey, well, the guy told him, well, what, he says, why you keep following me, I see everywhere I go. And he says, well, what can you do about it? He says, nothing you can do about it. And he didn't say who he was or anything like that. I wanted to ask you also, I'm sure with your being down in the Los Angeles area and all the people you've met and just your experiences, I'm wondering what's your favorite alien contact story?
I don't really have an alien contact story. I know that I talked to them, and I used to think when I was little that they took me through the walls.
Okay. Okay.
Now I
Okay.
think that that
Well,
actually happened. But there was one
a
when I
lot
was
of people
coming out
say that. Yeah.
of MK Ultra. I was in Vegas, and I was somewhere near like the little Alien Inn, and there was a train. I went to go get something to drink, and there was a train that looked abandoned. It was a restaurant called Penny's, and I was like, "F no, not going in there because I will be disappeared. I will be gone. They'll kill me."
Maybe.
And so, right, it was called Penny's Restaurants, and I heard a voice say, "I would like to go back to Area 51. It was nicer there." And I was like, "What?" And that's when I actually realized I had talked to these beings when I was a child. And that's one of the things that they used me for, is to talk to these beings. My father was in the military, my fake father, and he was stationed in Germany. What happened when he was stationed in Germany? I don't know. Did he meet Joseph Mengele, or did he start working with the Third Reich? Did he make some
What
promises?
part of Germany? What part of Germany?
I'd have to go back and look at his whole thing, but he was in
Wiesbaden.
two wars.
Okay. Yeah, because I was at Merrill Barracks in Nuremberg, Germany, and um, and
Did anything happen to you when you were there?
what's that?
Did anything happen to you when you were there?
Well, a lot of things happened to me because I was working with Criminal Investigation Division Drug Suppression Team. So, yeah, a lot of things. I've seen a lot of crazy stuff. Um, in one of my cases, um, there was this pimp who was selling heroin to the soldiers. And my job was to purchase some of that heroin so we can bust him and put him through an Article 32 in court martial. And one of his girls came out and she was on heroin, takes off her clothes and throws up on her breasts. So
Ew.
yeah, so I've seen a
Okay, I
lot.
could have gone the rest of my life without hearing that story.
Yeah, when I was in Germany, yeah, I saw a lot of crazy
You
things.
were in Nuremberg, right? You were in
Yeah,
Nuremberg,
Nuremberg,
right?
Yeah,
Germany.
you know
He
who
he
else
was
was
from he was from Gunsberg.
right?
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah. Do you
Gunsberg.
know who else was in Nuremberg?
Hmm.
Um was Clapper. James Clapper.
Oh, okay,
He
okay.
went to school, and his dad took him. He went to school in Germany, and his dad took him to the Nuremberg trials when he was 4. How does that guy end up head of the DIA and head of the NSA?
I testified at the Nuremberg trials, not the World War II stuff, but against two women, German women, who were selling heroin to the soldiers. So I had to testify. I had to go to where the Nuremberg trials was and testify against them.
So you were like John Travolta in that other movie,
Yeah.
uh, where
Staying alive.
Serpico?
no, it wasn't Serpico. He did
No,
another
not
movie where he was a
Serpico.
DEA agent within the military. I'll
Oh,
find that movie, and he was busting the captains and the people in there. I'll find that movie and send it to you. I grew up on movies, so that's that was my babysitter. So when I found out that that was me, I emailed Darrell and said, "I know that little girl is me in Stranger Things," and then I proceeded to cry for like the next week, and then like a month, because I realized that that was me, and I had asked God reveal myself to me, and He did. But he did it slowly, and I even thought at that point, wow, it's probably good that I'm in a crazy place, because how would I have handled finding that out? I mean, I found out a lot of things, and when I was homeless that period of time, it didn't phase me. I would, guide my guide myself from Starbucks to Starbucks, from one city to another. I went to Branson twice once to visit my guitar player, who, God, I don't even want to talk about that. There's another guitar player in another band called Big River. And
You had a thing for guitar players, huh?
no, I didn't have a thing for
They had a
Sadie.
thing for you?
Apparently,
Uh-oh. The guitar
Sadie,
players are smart. They're always the
Sadie,
smartest one.
are they? Are you a guitar player?
No, he's the
No,
singer.
Phil is.
It's just,
My dad's a guitar
No, I
player.
can play the guitar. Just out of playing, but that's not my, my instrument is probably like more like frontman or drums.
Okay.
But I was going to tell you, Al Bielek. What do you think of the Leo Al Bielek?
Oh,
This-
okay.
yeah.
Al Bielek. Okay, so I couldn't even say his name. I said his name was Al Bilecki.
Yeah.
I did a map. Okay, this
Bilecki.
was like when I got finally let out. Because my handler said, "Do you want a map of the world?" He bought me a map in Walmart, and I outlined the flood zone. Dude, I'm a singer. I've never been a conspiratorial person in my life. Okay, but I got this map and I outlined the whole flood zone, and I separated the United States into districts,
Okay.
which will happen after some cataclysmic event causes the flood, which would cause the Mississippi to go backwards again, which it did in Trail of Tears. And so I separated everything out, and I have pictures of the map. I had to leave it where I was before. I was in Texas, and I had to leave a great many things. I'm in a very safe place now. I can't even say where I am. I can't say I'm there. But anyway, so I outlined this map, and then subsequently after that, I managed to find a way out of being in the crazy house. But he looked at the map and he said, "Yeah, that's about right." And I was like, "What's about right? What do you mean that's about right?" And so then later on, I found out that that was Al Bielek's map. And I was like,
Wow.
what the H? And then I started investigating Al Bielek. Like, I investigate things in layers. So you investigate as much as you can, then you go on a little bit more, you investigate more. So I found out that he was actually from New York. And at one point he was in Jamaica, New York, which that's where my mom was born and raised, in Jamaica, New
wow.
York. And I'm like,
Okay.
did Al Bielek like know my mom?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now that
right.
would be something. That would be.
And then when I moved to Illinois, he had moved to Illinois. He moved to, I think, Crystal Lake, which that's where one of my churches was in Crystal Lake. And I went to Crystal Lake when Darrell called me, and I hadn't talked to Darrell in 40 years. And I was sitting on the dock of the bay, singing "Sitting on the Dock of the Bay." And
I
Darrell
love that
called me,
song. Otis Redding.
right? I was sitting on the dock of the bay, singing "Sitting on the Dock of the Bay," and Darrell called me. And I was like, this is weird. And it was in Crystal Lake. So the crystal things, I realized that I do have a skill set that I didn't realize that I had, along with just the psychic powers. I'm also a cipherist. So I decipher ciphers, and I also write in ciphers. So Kathy O'Brien had talked about this. She said that it goes along with the string of words. For instance, John said to me one time when I was having an affair, and he took me to a fair. I remember seeing that. And he said, "Do you want to know why my parents named me John?" And I said, "Not really, John, but I know you're going to tell me, aren't you?" And so he said they called him John out of a Bible verse. There was a man sent from God. His name is John. That's actually an MK Ultra coded string designed to either put you in MK Ultra compliance, right? And they revel in these things because I also believe that Steve was a handler, and he took me to Mexico to Rosarita Beach with my brother David. I disappeared out of a bar for about an hour. My brother David came out and said, "You need to come back inside. We're not in the United States anymore." I said, "I'm just out here having a cigarette." And he said, "You could have smoked an entire pack of cigarettes the time that you were out here." I think that I was taken in a black car, and I think I was asked to do an assassination. I can't prove it. I wouldn't have no idea of saying who that was. These days, I can't shoot, uh, you know, I can't shoot a stick that's sitting on the ground right in front of me. But under MK Ultra, you could be a sharpshooter and not know it.
Oh yeah.
And then I wrote a song about it because that's what we do. So I went home and I wrote a song called Let's Go to Mexico. And I had my keyboard player who was in the band The Ides of March. They did I'm Your Vehicle. I had him. His name is David Ariano. And the Ariano Felix cartel is very prevalent in Mexico, right? So he, he did the track for it. I sang it for him. But it the lyrics are let's go to Mexico, abandon all reality, leave a good job in the city. From now on, it's you and me. Let's go to Mexico, stomping on the cobbled streets. Let's drink another tequila shooter, then grab a little something to eat. And so when I'm living in my car, I'm going over every song I ever wrote or every song I ever sang. So I say it slowly because tequila is to kill ya, right? That's what they used to call it, to kill ya. So let's drink another tequila shooter, shoot her, or shoot her, and then grab a little something to eat. Well, I went back inside that bar and I ate something. So whatever, and my brother, he was kept in that bar by my husband so that they could take me somewhere. Can I prove any of this? Absolutely not. Do I feel it happened? Yes, I do. Would I be able to say if there was somebody who the person was? No, I have no idea. Do I believe it happened? Yes, because that's what MK Ultra is. MK Ultra is still going on. Its broad-based applications are mind control of the entire world. That's its broad-based applications. It has many acronyms. One is manufacture killers utilizing lethal tradecraft requiring assassinations. That's why they made it just short like that. But it also is, in its broad-based term, what the propagandist arm of the Mockingbird media is utilizing today. I believe that the current regime that is in that's bent on destruction, I believe, of the United States and of Earth and its inhabitants. I believe that the propagandist arm of the MSN is serving them, and they're serving the elite. Questions?
Where can we see you at? We've ran a little bit over the time. I feel like we could probably go all night.
Yeah, I can come back.
We'd love to have you back. Where can other viewers find you? The Awake Nation.
If you research my name, I always go by with the LA because there's a lot of Penny Shepherds, but there's not a lot of Penny LA Shepherds. So you can research me. You can find interviews that I've done at other places. You can find me at the Awake Nation Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 12 noon Eastern time. Or you can find me on the Dark Outpost at Dark Outpost TV. It's the Dark Outpost TV is a subscription base. We get into darker stories and they're a little bit longer. We have 1 hour of news every day, Monday through Friday. And then after that, we have 4 30-minute segments of interviews with a myriad of different whistleblowers, targeted individuals, political awakened individuals, scientists, actors, directors, musicians, paranormalists, just a wide variety. And then the Dark Outpost TV, in order to watch the Dark Outpost TV, it's $30 a year for a subscription. A lot of that money goes back into paying for the actual housing for the Dark Outpost, but we also give a substantial portion to fight sex trafficking. That is the goal. The goal is to provide a modium for whistleblowers, for truth tellers, And you know, I try to discern as much as I can before I bring somebody on the show. But you know, you never know. Some people are telling the truth and some people are not. And I leave that up to the guests. And you know, if we find inconsistencies, then we're probably not going to have you back on. But we try to provide the truth, and we tell everyone else, do your research and, you know, pray, ask God for discernment. That's
And
about it.
what I like about the Wake Nation is it has a lot of expose. I mean, on Epstein, on Pete Diddy. I mean, it
Yeah,
just goes
yeah.
on and on and on. And they really bring it out into the light. You know,
Yes, I'm
Pete
gonna
Diddy.
try. I was gonna write an expose, but I got hindered having to move and some other things that happened. But 50 Cent wrote an expose called "Did He Do It?" And
Did he do
mine
it?
is
Did he do it?
right. Mine is 1 cent. Did he did it? So
Those
I'm gonna.
those two go after each other. You know, it's
Mine's
crazy.
not 50 cent. Mine's 1 cent. Okay. His name is Penny. So I will be writing that expose, come hell or high water. You know, I'm going to continue to
And
try
by
and
the way,
write them.
Penny, I'm a pioneer of rap. When it I'm talking about since 1979, but that's another story. I could tell you
No,
like it's a
do
lot
you
of
know
rappers
Jimmy
out, but
Levy?
when who?
Jimmy Levy. Look him up. Google him. He did General Flynn's sound for his movie, the General Flynn movie. He also helped with Into the Light, which is Mike Smith out of Shadows. He's also been on
Okay,
the show. So
okay,
just Google him. He sings like an angel, man. He's a rapper. He's in Miami, and
okay,
his
okay,
mom's on the show. He's been on the show a couple times. But
okay.
anyway, gentlemen, I want to thank you very much. This has been enjoyable.
Thank you. It
Yeah,
was
Thank
great
thank
talking to
you.
you,
thank
Penny.
you so
Really
much.
appreciate your time.
That was all right.
Okay, everybody. Have a great night.
All
Hey,
right.
thanks, Phil.
Thank you, Kenny.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Paul. Thank you, Penny.
Okay, Zandine, Phil.
Good night.